Well, listen, everybody, we're going to get started, and thanks for joining us. I know it's a day and a half before, at least in the U.S., a nice Thanksgiving celebration, and we all have to pack in our 68 hours into 3 days, if you're like me in our past work. But I just want to welcome you to this session of Practice Habits. We know more will be joining here as we get started. Just to give you all some background, Practice Habits is something that we started about 4 months ago, and it's a weekly session like this that we use just as a clearinghouse to share information amongst practice leaders. A lot of times we wait for our national meetings or some of the other kind of what I call shoulder meetings, the meetings in between, in order to exchange implementation ideas. And so we had the idea a while back, since most of the important information, or some of it at least, is the information exchanged in the hallways after the sessions. Why don't we try to extend that to be more regular? And so we created these sessions. We've had them almost every week. Some of them talk about how to implement technology. Some of them talk about how to create a better team culture, how to market. This one today is going to be talking about how we implement new strategies for efficiency, but really, it's kind of even beyond that. It's about our outlook on practice implementation. How do you get a team motivated to work in a certain direction? And I'm excited to do that, have this session today with my friend Bruce Maller. Um, Bruce and I have known each other a long time. Actually, within the first few months of me joining Vance Thompson Vision, Bruce came into South Dakota, and I had just left an ad agency. Bruce, I don't know if you remember this because it
I
was a
do.
long time ago. It was just after the Carter administration,
Yeah,
and and
dating both of us.
yeah, and one of our lead optometrists, who's just a gem of a guy, was thinking of coming back. He had left the practice for a few years,
Mhm.
and I mean, maybe I was 20 days on the job. And Bruce, you came in and helped navigate that conversation with us. And you've always worked closely with the firm that was across town. But we've always had affection from afar, though haven't directly worked on much. We've had a few projects over the years with our partners, but you have a big reputation. You're kind of the practice whisperer,
Mhm.
and can really get doctors and leaders motivated. But you also do the same thing for industry. And so when you retired from BSM Consulting and passed that baton on to the next generation of leadership, first of all, wildly successful with a reputation that went out on a high note. But then it does kind of leave this question. I mean, what are we going to do without Bruce? Right. And so for the last few years, folks have been trying to get you on their boards where we've had a chance to kind of reconnect and rekindle. But I'm really pleased that we're going to be talking today about year-end stuff, how to keep the team motivated, and really just the state of the state as it relates to ophthalmology. And so thanks for joining us. I don't know if you care to defend yourself with any of my introductions, but maybe you can say a little bit more about yourself.
Sure, and I'm very grateful, Matt, for the invite, and excited to have the opportunity to visit with the folks on this call. I retired officially from BSM at the end of 2021. But it wasn't just an event, it was a process. We engaged in active succession planning for many, many years. There were about 70 people in the organization. And there's always that concern about the founder who disappears and what happens to the company as a result of that. But I think it ties into your practice implementation theme. Because what we knew from lots of experience, both at BSM and in the practices that I had the great fortune to work with, the better performing organizations, they are really good at execution and implementation of whatever it is that they decide to pursue. But so everybody here knows I'm not kind of officially retired. As Matt knows, we sit on the ASCRS Foundation board together, and I sit on several other boards as well. But it's on my terms, and it's a small piece of my life, relatively speaking. But I do have my life back, and it's been a wonderful thing because it's actually created a tremendous amount of clarity, Matt, for me about life because I have lots of time to reflect upon my life experiences, both personally and professionally. And there's a lot of learnings that I reflect upon and would love to share with the group just some of my thoughts about that because it all ties in to your basic theme. And I am very happy to share any and all of my experiences that I think are relevant to the folks on this call.
Well, what I'd like to do is start, first of all, I'm very intrigued by that clarity that you talked about. And
Hmm.
one of the nice things about this being a non-sponsored, a session that we all kind of run together is we get to off-road and take it where we want, and
Yeah.
so that's intriguing. I recently, as you know, went through a similar moment of clarity in leaving the practice.
Yeah.
One that was, wildly successful, has a really good reputation, worked with mentors and friends, and yet, who trades in an A plus for an A plus? So you have to ask that question. We'll get to that. Maybe just because not everybody hears it. They hear where you have where you were at the pinnacle of your career and where you are now in, I'll say air quotes, retirement, because I know you remain very busy. And you're a fool in this industry if you don't want somebody like Bruce on your board. But tell me about how it all began, because I've got my version, the shorthand. You consulting company had some role at Allergan, created this bench of incredible leaders that really, I mean, you really created practice implementation philosophies
Did.
and turned that into a separate business that now is scaled. And these that's my very shortened version. But give
Yeah,
us the play by play.
sure. Yeah, well, I think it starts with mom and dad. I was super fortunate. Had a competitive advantage in that I had a great gene pool.
Hmm.
And dad owned a grocery store, smaller store, competed against the big chains. And so I had the great fortune to work with my dad for about 7 years of my childhood, really. And as someone who's very curious and interested in learning, I had this great platform in which to just observe and see what my dad did in some small way to build a great business. And it was always about his people. What I always noticed is dad never had any turnover. And this was in New York, where the unions were totally entrenched in the grocery business, but my dad was a non-union shop and fought the unions for many, many years. On the flip side, with my mom, who was an RN by background and training, and in her entire life never earned a dollar as a registered nurse. She was
Hmm.
a volunteer. So I, as a child, used to kind of go along with mom, and we would go to senior citizen centers where mom was in charge of whatever the day was, and I was just the tag along as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and but again, observe this amazingly kind and wonderful human being, that being my mom. So I had that advantage, and so it's kind of thread through the fabric of who I am as a person. Many people don't know a lot of that backstory. But I grew up in a family of doctors, uncles, aunts, cousins, and so forth were all physicians, and they were all terrible business people that I was able to observe as well. So, but that is where the thread kind of begins to, weave a fabric of sorts. That relationship with mom and dad, that experience growing up in this family of dysfunctional physicians, none of whom understand business, and I had an interest in business. So that's where it kind of began. But I was psychology undergraduate degree with a minor in business, but business was really my passion. And the journey began, and I decided to, find my way on my own because that was kind of who I was and what I wanted as an individual. And began with a client of mine. My first ever client was an OBGYN in La Jolla, California, Bob Fiorentino. Love Bob, is a great human being, a dear friend. And Bob asked me to help him on a project. He was in a group of 6 obstetrician gynecologists. And Bob was there a year. He was the biggest producer in the group, and he was the lowest earner in the group.
Hmm.
And he said, maybe you could help me figure this out, but they want me to become a partner, but I'm going to make less as a part. It was a dysfunctional compensation structure. I'll cut it short and just say that in their model with these six doctors, 62/3 of the cash flow was divided based on seniority.
Oh,
And
wow.
the balance was based on productivity. So he had 1 year of service in the group, and of course, in the formula, you quickly discover a zero-sum game, which was there's only so much money available, and if you're going to win, the others are going to lose, and I don't think that's going to go over well. The group ended up hiring me, and that was my first official engagement as a consultant. And I
Now,
knew
about how
nothing,
old were you at the time?
20, 23, 24 years old,
Wow.
honestly. Yeah, and I looked it too. Probably looked 20 at the time. So I came up with a solution, but again, you quickly discover that at the margin, he was not going to benefit that much by the changes that they finally agreed to. So a year went by, and he and the second highest producer in the group and the second lowest earner, they left the group. There were no non-competes. There was no non-competes in the state of California at the time for doctors in employment relationships. They went across the street. The other doctors stayed, and they formed a little expense sharing partnership across the street. I helped them design all of that, and I was on my way, and they were referring me to everybody,
Oh,
everybody
wow.
that they knew from training, and that's where it
Right.
started. That's where it started. So a professional problem solver. I don't care what the issue was that you presented to me. I have a sense of fair play, I have a sense of business, and so forth. And that's where it really began.
And then when did you get involved with our friends at Allergan?
Yeah, my first contract with them was in July of 1985. So you have to fast forward now. I go into business for myself in 1979. My date of incorporation was 4/1 of 79. So it's 1985, and I get introduced to some folks at Allergan, and they had an idea, and the idea was about, how could we provide some basic education and training for young doctors on the business side of healthcare. And so we created a program called Future Focus. We wrote a textbook, myself and three other people, and we taught these courses to young doctors. We went around the country, and they were all ophthalmology residents and fellows. And so over the period of 11 years of that program's lifespan, before we did a train the trainer model for them at Allergan, which led to the development of a consulting team, and that's a whole nother chapter in that relationship. But I taught about 10,000 ophthalmic residents and fellows. And for the 30 years thereafter, it didn't matter, ASC or SAA, I'd go to a meeting, someone would stop me and say, you may not remember this, but we had lunch, at Will's Eye Hospital, and you were teaching this class and whatever, and you made such a big difference in my life, and you helped me to see clearly what I needed to do with my life. And yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you didn't even know
85.
probably that you were laying the groundwork
No,
for
no
future
idea.
success, but these were all future, I mean, not to keep it calloused in business, but these are future prospects.
Big time. But I didn't think of it that way
Of
because I
course.
wasn't that smart. I just thought of it, let me go and help them.
Right.
The success you enjoy in life, whether it's however you want to measure it, is an outcome. It's an outcome of doing the right thing. It's the same thing in building a great company. It's the same thing in building a great practice.
Hmm.
It all begins and ends with developing the right environment where people want to be part of something special and unique. I mean, people that work in an ophthalmic practice, there's a great burden of responsibility that goes along with that. But imagine if we could create something magical, if we create what I observed at Vance Thompson Vision. And we could spend hours just talking about what the key elements of that were.
Mhm.
But truthfully, I was more focused on just doing right by people, just solving problems, making them happy. It's in my nature. It's the energy that I lead with. It's my primary love language is
Yeah.
acts of service and acts of kindness for others. That's how I was raised. That's what I do. That's all that I know. So I just
Well, it turns
translated
out it's
that
a
into
pretty good
business.
business model to scale too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It has its pluses and minuses when it comes to trying to scale that. But that's what I'm probably most proud of is when I look back on my career and having 70 odd people working at BSM, none of whom wanted to leave
Hmm.
because they loved working in a healthy environment where we valued people and we worked together to build something unique, different, that had purpose.
Yeah, the purpose part I feel like is the sometimes the most difficult thing to communicate because my purpose might not be the same as the rest of the team. And so finding some kind of commonality there. I mean, you really have to be, pardon the term, because it can carry some baggage, but you have to be an evangelist. You have to,
Yes.
you have to kind of preach about something and make it worth listening to, and to try to inspire some kind of followership. So you're transitioning from future focus then. You've got this small group of Navy SEAL type, my words, consultants that know how to
Hmm.
take the wares of Allergan and go into practices. Give us a sense of that, because this is when I think you're interacting now with David Endicott, who's future leader at Alcon. I mean, it's the who's who
Yeah,
of ophthalmology back then.
it's unbelievable. And not to leave out David Pyatt, who
Of
was
course.
the board chairman and CEO at Allergan, and then turned the reins over to Mike Ball. These two sensational leaders, great human beings. And David reported to them. David was part of that whole culture and environment that was created. Allergan was a flagging company for many, many years till it was a change of leadership.
Hmm.
That's a whole other component to this in terms of practice implementation and practice success, is talking about the importance of leadership and the role it plays and so forth. But that relationship evolved into the 1990s when David Pyatt did come along at Allergan, as well as Mike Ball. And those were two people central to my professional development because they learned what I did and what I was doing. And they were intrigued by what I was doing because in their minds, they saw it, putting a business hat on, they saw it as a differentiator. They saw it as something which was a sustainable differentiator in terms of the value proposition that they were bringing to practices. Because in those days, if they were competing in the glaucoma med space, it was kind of look-alike stuff, right? It was all me too. And how do you create Lumigan looks different than Alphagan that looks different than some other glaucoma drug? And what they finally realized was it was listening to customers. It was trying to understand unmet needs of customers on the business side. And that led to the evolution of our consulting concept. And David Endicott, who and eventually left and then became now as board chairman and CEO at Alcon, David got it. So he
Yeah.
saw the power in that. And so we then began as he evolved in his career at Allergan, he went on to become president of Allergan Canada, president of Allergan Europe, then came back into the US to take over president of aesthetics at Allergan, which became a big business because of Botox and fillers and so forth. And so David and I went around the world and we built this, we basically exported this business model that we created in the States and we built it into a worldwide phenomenon and we focused it in aesthetic medicine. And that led to the evolution of Botox. And so, having been involved from the beginning of the launch of Botox Cosmetic across the globe, I was in every country that it got launched in, with the exception of South America. Um, we realized that people were the same, right? They have the same needs. They're interested in the same things. And we just built practice management tools and resources and built this train the trainer model with the best and brightest that worked at Allergan. And BSM was involved in that. That evolved and now today, still the largest customer at BSM/VMG today, VMG being the company that acquired BSM. And it's still a model that has stood the test of time. So BSM then evolved. While this is happening, back to your point about you have these evangelists, these people that believe in what we're trying to do, our business just blew up. And then we
Right.
were just trying to hang on to whatever we could hang on to and hire great people and build all the infrastructure at BSM to support the growth of our company and the demand for our services, but do it in a way that never lost sight of our core, right? Our core value, our mission, those things as I look back now, are a constant in the evolution of BSM. Now, holding that all together were some basic elements which were built around a culture with a very strong set of values, the development of our people, discipline around our business planning, which I'm happy to talk more about, and the other key, I think, ingredient to that was how we effectively aligned incentives of our team with the entire ownership group. Part of that was strategic. We eventually had 22 shareholders. I sold 60% of the company. Used to drive my attorney crazy. How come you're giving up control? I'm like, you don't get it. In life, if you want to gain control, you give it up. You just give it up, but you manage it with accountability and all kinds of other things that make it a glue instead of giving up of control. So along the way, BSM this evolved and we grew in different areas. And I don't think you knew we were in cardiology for 10 years. We built a huge cardiology platform, and I turned around in the late 1990s and sold it and had a long-standing relationship with Boston Scientific, Columbia HCA. So we were big time in the heart business until I sold that division and signed a 5-year non-compete. So
I didn't know that.
yeah, we didn't
And
go back into
since it's hard
cardiology.
to believe, but ever since you've been heartless.
Yeah.
No, no, that's bad.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a question about that because you and I do want to get to the strategic planning piece.
Yeah.
But the idea of defining what the what is. So what is it that you were offering? You said practice management tools,
Yeah.
strategic planning. We've got folks on the line who are, they've run service models for ophthalmology. We've got some CEOs of practices. Give me just a broad sweeping menu of what your offerings were.
Well, I think I'm gonna answer that in a little bit of an indirect way, but I think it'll answer the question. I'm going to answer it by telling you what we did,
Okay.
because what we did with just not just for BSM, but we did it for all of our clients.
Hmm.
And that was most prominent during the start of the pandemic, where, people, I was doing these weekly town halls or whatever, and we have thousands of people show up for those calls. And tried to think, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to do is each week I'm going to share with them exactly what we're doing to deal with the fact that 100% of our clients were in elective procedures. So they're basically out of business, or they don't need us. Um, so I think much of what we did was just modeling what we did internally at BSM. Okay.
Okay,
So
that's great.
yeah, because the first thing I've thought about when I reflect back on the 3 or 4 things that were central to our success and the success of our clients. Number one was discipline. We were extraordinarily disciplined about planning. And part of that discipline of planning required the principals to be actively engaged in the process. So if you came to me as a physician, a group of physicians said, "Hey, Bruce, we need your help," I'd say, "Okay, great. But I don't want you to waste my time and your money unless you're prepared to actually engage in a process that is going to require active, you're going to have to be actively a part of that." So our planning at BSM it's just what we did every day. And it was anchored by a great strat plan, which was modified each year. The core of our strategic objectives didn't really change a whole lot. It was built around our people, developing our people, how we hired, how we developed, how we did everything that we did to create the right environment where people wanted to stay. They wanted to stay because they felt nurtured and their opinions were valued because every person on the team participated in our strat planning process. So we would always go away for a few days a year. Every year we did it for 35, 37 straight years. We went to different locations generally. After that many years, you end up repeating and going back to places you've been in the past. But and it was a combination of fun, but hard work. And we did that very, very early on in our process. And the second component to that was the outcome of that was a plan that we owned. And that plan became the living, working document. And it wasn't a complex document, Matt. It was a 3 to 4 page action plan of sorts, which said, here are major things we're focused on this next 12 months. Here are the objectives that we need to achieve in order to reach those goals or endpoints. Everything was measurable, and everybody participated in the outcome through alignment of incentives. And that was based on an ownership plan and a compensation program that made sure that when we did well and achieved our endpoints, everybody participated. So my incentive program for our team, for our employees, which I was one of them, never changed over the entire period of time I was at BSM. We never really wavered the plan at all. 50% of our profits of the company were shared with our employees after we set aside 20% of our total profits went into retained earnings. So we built a great balance sheet, which was an awesome thing when we sold the company because that
Right.
money was in the company and it was in cash and investments, and all the shareholders got a piece of that because we had already paid taxes on that. That was our money. So we built a great balance sheet. So we had strong financial standing. We had no debt. We had an efficient P&L. We had we lived to our budget every single year. So once the plan was developed in September, October, November, the plan was baked. The budget came as a result of the plan. So the plan fed the development of our budget. The budget became our master plan for the next 12 months. And every month we looked at budget to actual. Any variances we would identify and we would tweak as we went, and everything was open book. So the second piece I would say to everybody, not only were we disciplined, we planned, we engaged everybody, but we shared all the information with everyone. There was complete and total transparency. And people would take copious notes and everybody would say, aren't you afraid to share that level of detail? I said, hell no. These are adults. We treat them as adults. We share and we're open with them. Does that mean they know what everybody makes? No. We have mutual respect is part of the core values of this company. One of the things you respect is confidentiality. So you have to be appropriate, but once you start treating people that way, they get really smart, really fast, and they figure things out on their own. And that ability for us to self-manage and build great teams and great leaders. So leadership development was a key part of our strategic plan every year. So we built and developed wonderful people within our organization who led, and that was a key part of what we did. But we were so committed, Matt, to execution. When I come back to the name of your session, practice implementation piece, it was just how it's what we did. We didn't know any differently. And we would take those things we learned and we would bring it into our practice consultations. And I'd be able to say, this is how we did it. It may not work for you. You may want to tweak your incentive plan. It may not be exactly the same way we do it. But what I found is those clients who got engaged all of a sudden figured out this is pretty powerful if we do it the right way. So those are little things that we did that really helped kind of chart our course. And I kept learning and I kept teaching. Everything I'd learn, I would teach to my clients, and I would use my life experiences and those experiences working with other great practices, because the best practices that I saw, they tended to do the same things,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
and it informs then how you interact with the next ones, right? It's just more good examples.
Exactly. And you have things that work really well, things that don't work quite as well. How many partnerships that I have to unfold or untether just because people didn't behave well and whatever. That's a whole nother conversation.
Well, this strategic part, because it feeds into implementation so well, and it's practice implementation, but it's really business implementation. The uh it can be a little bit overwhelming, and I find myself, I'll just kind of give an example of our own companies, having worked and being an entrepreneur and having several business lines at the practice level, things have become rote, like baked into the annual
Yeah.
planning of things. When you turn around and you're doing it in a small business again, it's very simple to get out of sync. To say, well, we're smaller. I don't know that we need to have all that rigidity. When I feel like maybe we need it more, right? To establish all of those tendencies, those habits right down to bedrock, so the company can grow properly.
It's funny. I was focused on the word rigidity
Yeah.
because I would have said fluidity.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. See, my vantage point on is as we got bigger, it got easier because we had built the proper infrastructure. We built the systems. We hired right. We trained right. We developed right. We built our leaders. We're constantly trying to push our people to become better versions of themselves because we cared and we loved them. I mean, if
Yeah.
you ask me, what do I miss the most? I miss my friends. I miss my people. I loved everybody at BSM and I loved hiring new people, but it got so much easier over time. And that fed into our succession plan. And people used to laugh at me. I'd say, here's my goal in life. I want to retire and have you not notice that I'm gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's remarkable.
Now, I miss them and they miss me,
Hmm.
and it's hard now because we did sell the company and you always lose something in that process. And I have to keep reminding my friends at BSM, they bought the company. They have the right to screw it up if they so choose. It's of their choosing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I want to, so we try to
I was
set
being
aside time
facetious.
in these sessions to get questions from our audience, but I want to ask one more question as we transition there, because I mean, we could talk for hours and hours, Bruce, because you're such a wealth of experience and information. But as I look at the practices here and the leaders here, they're all small businesses.
Yeah.
As you're thinking about if we breathe in this idea of, this kind of practice culture, the fluidity, the training well, and then aligning incentives, what is the very first step, if you can choose one, for the leaders on this call?
So the very first thing I would do is what I did. In 1998, 1999, I was a really tough inflection point in my life. You have teenage kids, and I was running multiple companies. I had taken over as chairman of the board of a failing company to try and do a turnaround. I had BSM, I had so many things going on in my life. And frankly, I was struggling. And it was overwhelming. It was too much in many, many ways. And so I looked inward. And so the first thing that I did was self-examination. And I can recall one of the most influential pieces of work I read in my life, which had such a material difference in my life, was re-examining my own, what was called at the time emotional intelligence. And I was super fortunate to come across Daniel Goleman's work at Harvard and the early work they did on emotional intelligence, because I felt like I was failing in a lot of ways. And so I just began to look inward. And Goleman's work became my guidepost for probably the last 25 years of my career. I would read the same Harvard Business Review work of his study on emotional intelligence, the research they did on that back in the 1990s. And Matt, it helped me tremendously to gain a healthier perspective. So if I'm
Hmm.
sitting listening, um, and I've had these life experiences, I've made my share of mistakes, but the things that I learned through Goleman's work and simultaneously 21 years of coaching competitive soccer teams. So this is all going on at the same time in my life. I learned as much about life coaching boys for 15 years and girls for 6 years, and while trying to become better at life. So to me, it began with me. It began with me doing an objective assessment of my ability to regulate my emotions, become more self-aware, become more empathic, do things for the right reasons, and to always work at improving my communication skills, in particular, my listening skills. And I took all those things to heart. So to me, it starts there. It starts with your own reflections upon what I can do differently or better to become a better person, a better leader, and to fulfill my obligations and responsibilities more effectively. That's where I would start.
Well said. And that's where, I mean, almost all of the work is, isn't it? Just on ourselves.
It's where it is. And then our ability to share and be open, be willing to be humble with everyone you come in contact with in your life.
Hmm.
And clearly, and I'll just be honest, I'm a little more selfish now in that I choose to be with people that are positive, that see life through in a certain way. And but it's my prerogative now.
Yeah, that's right.
Hence
That's
how
right.
you and I end up on the foundation board together.
It's nice to say, and it means even more than that you join us in a session like this because you certainly don't have to, but we appreciate it. So I want to open up the lines to some questions, and we've got um, a sage advisor for our craft, but also just business in general, and also just kind of personal development here in Bruce. Um, Anybody have any questions for him as it relates to your own business or your own life?
Not having questions is not an option, by the way,
Yeah, I mean, I can call on people.
man.
Bill, I know you're on the line and you're not ever shy. Why don't you've got um, a business that you've had to have change its trajectory several times. Any questions for Bruce while I read the one in the chats?
Uh, no questions for Bruce, but I just hear the journey. Because our own journey for the last 23 years and all of have to make and what's going on with the economy, what's having an impact on it. I think I just love to hear stories like that. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing it with us.
Oh, you're very welcome, Bill. And it's a, it's these last, if I just encapsulate the last 10 years of the influence of private equity in the ophthalmic space, that's a whole conversation in and of itself because it's not been a healthy one and it's created a lot of disruption in our space. And the market, that part of our market has evolved in ways that are not good. It's
Completely
not,
agree. Now,
it's
have
not
you
good.
seen in your experience, though, with the private equity, because we see a lot of them are led by people that are in the industry still, they came
Yes.
from ophthalmology, and then we see others that are led by people that came out of any kind of specialty. Are you seeing a difference in how they have an impact, whether it be positive or negative?
Yes. You know, if you want to call it a playbook, Bill, there is a playbook when private equity gets involved in any type of investment. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's what's worked for them. But the world of healthcare services is different. The world of ophthalmology is even that much more different than other insular healthcare specialties, right? It's just different. So they may have been successful in derm or PT or veterinary medicine or whatever, and they get into ophthalmology and like, oh my God, this is really different. It is. It is in a lot of ways. But the difference that I see is that those platforms that have retained some of the core leaders who have grown up in our space had able to preserve, I think, a business model that is somewhat recognizable, whereas the others, I'd say, less so. And there's been
Right.
a significant amount of turnover on those non-ophthalmic, more traditional business CEOs. They're not making it in this space.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And they were put in to execute either a turnaround or a focus on whatever. But unfortunately, they're focused on the wrong things. And that's not how you build a great ophthalmic business. That's again a separate conversation for a different day. And I'm intimately involved and have been because having worked with so many of the largest practices, they were the first ones to, in many cases, want to monetize. And I can't blame any of them for doing that, right? And their business had been undervalued. Someone's going to give them a truckload of cash. And I would just say, look, if you're happy with the cash and you put no value in the rollover equity, then you'll be okay if it doesn't turn out to be. Well, a couple of the early players, they did do some recaps. There were two or three that were successful in our space, but there are 30 that are not.
Hmm.
So,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Well, and on that topic, and we'll just take one more minute on this topic and then shift. But to what extent do you think we'll see in the next 3 to 5 years some of those same doctors being able to purchase their practice back?
It's happening already.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so here's the way this evolves, generally speaking, it's all situational, trust me, because of the terms on which these deals were originally capitalized, in terms of debt and equity, who those players were. the timing of this, the practices that were required. Um, but what's happening now, Matt, very specifically, is that of the 30 or so, I'm going to leave off the Prism, Retina Consultants, those that are required by McKesson or Cencor or whomever. I'm going to leave those to the side for a moment. Those are separate opportunities which are skewing the playing field. And it's largely because they're driven by companies who are publicly traded companies who are vertically integrated, who are trying to control the lines of distribution. We all get that part. But that leaves 33 or 34 other platforms. Of those 33 or 34, I would venture to guess, and this is an educated guess on my part, I'd say half of them are underwater, meaning the assets are not worth the debt that's owed against the companies. So, Matt, what's evolving now is in some cases, the lenders have taken over these assets, thinking that they can at least get out of this thing whole, only to find out that that's not possible. And the doctors are choosing to leave. So a lot of doctor out-migration from a lot of these.
Right.
And then other doctors just simply negotiating to buy back their practices, which is what happened in the mid-1990s, when the original first generation of consolidators were in the space. And in those instances, I'd say 75 to 80% of those doctors bought back their practices on the cheap. This is going to be a little bit different, but I do see that evolving. It's just going to take a little bit of time for it to wind its way, for eventually the lenders and or the sponsors to say, there's nothing here for us, we're walking away. And when the lenders walk away, what are they going to do? There's only one logical buyer for those assets, and that is the doctors that still work there.
Yeah, that's right. And it's partly because of the history and the stories I've heard from the past that I thought, that a similar model
It's
might
it's
occur.
it's similar, but the purchase terms are so different.
Yeah,
The
got it.
outcomes have to look a little bit different. It won't be exactly the same.
Yeah. It won't be pennies on the dollar.
And that's okay. It could even be, at fair value of fixed assets.
Sure.
But whatever it is, and this goes back to really the core of what we've lost. The core of what we lost, because they acquired so many of these outstanding practices, we lost the passion, the fire, the enthusiasm that made these practices great in the first place. Now, this is not 100% of these platforms. Some of them are doing a good job and are going to do just fine because they have sponsors, private equity firms, and lenders who don't want to walk away. And if they have to hold these assets for 15 years, they will.
Yep. Got it.
That's a minority, small minority.
But what I hear you saying is that some of the, with the current state, is that some of the doctors who may be good candidates to buy their practice back may have lost the fervor or the entrepreneurial spirit or the desire to be back in management or all the things that made them sell or entice them to sell in the first place. And that plus pricing and other things might create some different nuances in the current state.
But there are a younger generation of physicians who have a strategic bones in their body, who will be opportunistic, and they could find, again, where something looks terrible, someone's going to find an opportunity on the right price and on the right terms. So there will be assets to be acquired at fair prices, I believe.
Well, and all those practices, Bill, are going to need call centers and consultants. So hopefully we can hold our breath.
Awesome. We'll be here for them.
That's right.
Yes.
Thanks again. I'm going to go off camera, but I just wanted to say thank you and happy Thanksgiving to both of you as well.
Same to you, Bill.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Bill.
you. Great to see you.
There was another question that came in just on other ways to align a high-performing work culture. You talked about incentives and some other things. Maybe you can just offer a couple of other concrete examples, and then I've got one closing question for you, Bruce.
Yeah. So a couple of things. And I think it comes back to the core of who a practice is in terms of their values, coupled with their mission and their vision. And it comes back to recruiting and identifying the people that you want to bring into your organization. And what we discovered was we were able to use those three elements of values, vision, mission as our strongest recruiting tools. What we found is younger people wanted to be part of something meaningful. So we leveraged that to hire really good people, but that's only part of the equation. The second equation was the onboarding and the development process that organizations need in order to identify their talent, invest in their talent, and to build great individuals. And people would say, well, gosh, give me an example of that. I said, well, we used to fund master's programs. And we probably, I don't know, maybe we did 10 or 12 over the course of BSM. And people say, well, you're going to fund their getting their MBA and then they're going to leave. And I'm like, you know what? I don't even think about that. They may decide they want to stay and leverage that degree or whatever it is to be part of BSM. And
Yeah.
if they love
Or
it
what if they
here,
don't learn and stay?
yeah,
Worse.
it's worse for sure. So those are tangible examples of things that we did that really helped people to become just simply better
Hmm.
at life. So those investments to me had tangible results that we could measure. We could measure in terms of retention rate, just career development opportunities, people that wanted to become better, but wanted to be part of our organization. So we made that strategic. And we coupled that with economic incentives to create then the glue. So it was a combination. It wasn't one thing in isolation. It was the multitude of things we did to create a healthy environment. Not everybody stayed because not everybody was well suited to be part of BSM. Not everybody fit. And so it was okay. There were never really tough conversations because if we saw someone underperforming, it kind of stood out. And the others who were sharing profitability in the company at the end of the year didn't really want them around. So
Yeah.
they tended to manage themselves out of the company. But we did have a healthy amount of turnover, but it was, probably 5 to maybe 6% a year. And some of it was just people leaving because they were relocating or whatever. A lot of people left, relocated, and stayed working for us. And that was certainly true during the pandemic. So those are tangible things we did to strengthen the culture, help develop people, and help them want to stay as part of our organization.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I'm reminded just how important it is to stay on top of those things. And like I said before, all the companies that are represented here, I think we're still small enough to really affect change in an efficient manner if we recommit to those things, starting first with ourselves. I want to transition us to this final question, and you teased it early on, but you said these last few years have provided moments of clarity for you and reflection. And I'd like you to, if you don't mind, I'd like to challenge you to maybe be vulnerable with us and share what some of those moments of clarity are.
Yeah. The moments for me, first of all, clarity comes by eliminating stress and drama in your life, right? When you step away from something, and I feel so at peace with the good work our team did over the period of time that I was fortunate enough to work at BSM. And so you feel really, really good about yourself in terms of having created opportunities for clients and for people that worked in the company to be better at life. So when you separate from the day to day, which consumed every ounce of your being for me 24/7, not really, but because I did always try to maintain proper balance in my life. But when you step away from it and time passes, and each day you are free to decide what I want to do today, who I choose to do it with, whether it's my puppies, whether it's my horses, whether it's my friends, my family, or my grandkids, whatever it is. It's amazing how your mind is able to process things that you put on hold for a long time. So each day I feel like if I went back to work today, I'd be doing the best work of my career. And it's because I can see things so much more clearly. And what's interesting is to contrast that with the clients who still call me, and there's a bunch of them. And I found a way to get rid of them, which is to charge them, but I don't do that. I do it all pro bono. But I'm joking. But it's true because I get to see and experience what they're going through every day, and they can't see things. And I'm like, well, you just need to tilt the lens on its axis, and all of a sudden you're going to see clearly. All you need to do is stop worrying about that. There's nothing you can do about that. And why not, sell 10 more shares of your surgery center? Are you worried that you're not going to have the money? What you're going to gain by virtue of doing so? For me, Matt, my ability to process whatever the issue is that comes before me, I've never felt more able to see things in a way that allows me to go, ah, I got that. And now I get to bring it places where I can feel like I can drive more value in that
Mhm.
context. Hence why I'm on the foundation.
Yeah.
Think about that. Is that the greatest gift you could imagine? The world of ophthalmology gave me so much love, support. It's unbelievable how it filled my bucket.
Hmm.
And now I get to work with the community of ophthalmology through the foundation and do amazing things and help support amazing things that this profession does.
Yeah. It's full circle.
Full circle moment.
Full
Thank you.
circle.
Yeah.
Bruce, I don't know what your next few weeks look like, but I look forward to having a weekly commitment of having you on this show. Uh, uh, all joking aside, it seems like that it goes by too fast every time, and I want to hang on to every morsel of things that you share with us because I think um, you articulate what I think our professional hearts yearn for in gaining that clarity,
Yeah.
um, and having kind of gone to the other side of a professional life fulfilled, serving others fulfilled, and now having the joy of now turning around back and giving back, I think is what we all strive for. But I'm just grateful that you would, especially this week, spend some time with us.
It's a
'Cause we've
perfect
got some
week to
good
do it.
things to reflect on from our
Right.
conversation.
Isn't this a perfect week to do it, though?
So good.
Because
So
to me, one of the things you asked me is about Q4, the end of the year, gratitude. It screams out. If I did nothing else as a proprietor, administrator, physician, all I would do the next 5 weeks, I would do it every day, truthfully. But make sure you go out of your way to thank people.
yeah. Yep.
We forget. We're so, it's amazing the gift of being able to work in this profession. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, but you have a chance to shape it in a way that makes it easier and makes it better.
Well, I appreciate your time, sir, and I'm thankful for you. I look forward to the time we get to spend in the future with our future work on the ASERS Foundation and operations site. I want to transition us to Casey Gantz. She's on the line today, but next week we're talking about how to implement IG. She in Dallas, Texas, has implemented it in a really fun fashion and really effective for their what has been mostly refractive
Mhm.
program, now doing a lot of IG and frankly just helping a ton of patients who normally might not get that classical help from an environment like hers. Casey, thanks for being willing to, and thanks for showing your awesome office. I had the pleasure of seeing her office 2 weeks ago. It's everything you would dream of plus.
Hi, Casey.
Bruce, thank you so much for being on today. I just sit here like Matt in awe of all the amazing things that you share and just the, emphasis on that last piece that you said. That just rings really true. I kind of got a little tear in my eye.
Mhm.
That's how I feel about our team. The one thing that we can do is advocate for the people doing the real hard work in the weeds every day.
Every day.
And as long as we're doing that, then we're on the right spot. We're in
That's
the
it.
right space.
That's all that matters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for spending an hour with us, everybody. Keep coming back, and we will try to continue to bring valuable insights like this from Bruce today. Bruce, we're thankful for you. Casey, happy belated anniversary, and
Thank you.
we'll talk to everybody next week. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.